Hello again. I realise, of course, that laughing at the misfortunes of others is unattractive, but there really is something a little comical about the dismay felt by so many people as it dawns on them that they have been mugs and that trusting governments is seldom a good idea. Last summer, I met a number of people in Britain who were delighted to be relaxing at home and not having to go to work, all because the government was paying them to do so. This was part of a dubious strategy designed to prevent an illness spreading across the country. It appears in those days that the British government had literally unlimited amounts of money to fool around with and spend on their plans. They were chucking around billions of pounds with no apparent thought for the consequences. There were, of course, always going to be at least three consequences, but like gullible people watching the three-card trick, nobody seemed to be able to spot the inevitable outcome of it all. Seriously, in day-to-day life, what would you think if somebody came up to you and offered you free money for doing nothing other than sitting at home watching television for months on end? I'm guessing that most of us would realise at once that it was a confidence trick and we would decline to be drawn in. When a known scoundrel and liar like Boris Johnson is the front man for the caper, that in itself should have started alarm bells ringing and told everybody that there was something fishy about the whole thing. But there we are. The idea of free money is rather tempting, I'll agree. So it was that we all threw caution to the wind and lolled about in our homes and gardens, believing that the money to pay for all this was somehow being magicked out of thin air by a benevolent government led by that well-known philanthropist, Boris Johnson. What were the downsides of the scheme? The first was, of course, that the government had to borrow huge amounts of money to pay for this. Not only this, of course, but a whole lot of other stuff connected with the pandemic. They also, of course, by the trick known as quantitative easing, started printing enormous amounts of new banknotes, a process which is really no more than the state-sponsored counterfeiting racket. These two things had the effect of firstly putting the government into debt, of course, and secondly causing inflation to soar. I'm sure that we've all noticed that prices for everything have been going up very sharply since the pandemic began. That's what happens when the government tries to solve a problem by printing more money. Labour used to be very fond of this particular strategy in the 1970s, and it caused catastrophic inflation and nearly destroyed the British economy. Because of all this, those with life savings are seeing their money shrink in value because the interest they receive on their investments isn't rising at the same way that prices are. In effect, those people have been robbed by the government. There's still all the money which the government borrowed on the quiet to fund their various mad schemes, and this will all have to be paid back too. Since the government doesn't have any money at all of its own, guess who will have to foot the bill for these debts? Yes, that's right, the British people themselves will have to stump up and pay back all those billions of pounds which the government borrowed last year. The increase in national insurance we saw the other day is nothing at all compared with what we'll be facing in the future. The tax burden on ordinary people in Britain is now higher than it has been at any time since the end of the Second World War, and it's going to rise much higher than this yet. This is why I'm unable to resist a grim chuckle when I meet people who were so keen to do their bit for the country last year by sitting at home watching television instead of going to work, and finding it a very novel and pleasing experience into the bargain. I honestly don't know where those people thought the money was going to come from ultimately, other than out of their own pockets. That institution we know vaguely as the government does not have a single penny to its name. The only money it has is that which it takes, borrows or steals from us. Left-wing people think that the state knows better than we do what we should be spending our money on, and so it taxes us highly and then uses our money for what it thinks are sensible and wise things. Traditionally, right-wing governments believe in low taxes, leaving people with more of their own money so that they can decide for themselves what they want to see it spent on. We now have a government which, although conservative in name, and so might be reasonably expected to be a little right-wing, is nevertheless behaving like an extremely left-wing administration of the sort we might have seen had Jeremy Corbyn won the election instead of Boris Johnson. We're being more highly taxed at any time in the lives of anybody who is not a pensioner because the government doesn't think we can be trusted to choose for our own selves what to spend our money on.